This is a picture, as you can see, of a girl arranging her hair. And she's not a high-class girl in this sense. And her hairstyle's quite simple. And she's in a fairly awkward pose. Now, what is this? Is this just genre, just showing everyday life? Well, it's been suggested that there's a challenge from Degas in it. That Degas is supposed to have made one of these remarks about women. He's, what do women know about style? And he's not talking about fashion here, I don't think. I think he's talking about art style. And so Cassatt is going to answer what she perceives as a challenge. So she's going to show that a picture can be beautiful because of the painter's style, not because of the beautiful sitter or this beautiful subject. It's a gorgeous landscape, or the person who's sitting for you just happens to be terribly beautiful. And it's just a little snobby about this. She says she's going to pick, this vulgar servant, someone who doesn't have a lot of personal beauty. I don't think the young lady is that ugly, frankly. I thought she was kind of cute. But I'm not quite as much of a snob, I guess, as Mary Cassatt is. I'm also from a different era. So we have the young servant girl who is in a kind of awkward pose. She's not dressed in satin, she's just wearing a simple smock. And so the beauty of the picture is going to come from the very careful composition, something Degas and Cassatt were very, very aware of, and the colors and the way they're used. And so what we're seeing here are, particularly in the garment, nuances and shades of pink and blue, and then different shades of those little darker reddish tones, for example, in the wallpaper and the blue on the vase or whatever it is that's on the furniture in the back. And those colors, a little more intense, are picked up in the subtler colors in the woman's garment. Once again, we've got that problem of reproductions changing colors and wiping out a few of the subtleties. Also in the composition, you'll notice, for example, there's this curving form of the edge of the, I guess, a dresser, table, commode, whatever it is. And there's sort of a branch-like pattern in the wallpaper behind it that parallels that. And then you'll notice that follows the young lady's shoulder. And where her braid is hanging down, it's a sort of darker brown than the leg of the furniture. And then as her arm is raised up, we've got the edge of the mirror behind it. So there's a kind of parallelism, that the furniture and the pattern echoes the positioning of the figure's arms. Parallelism works in both writing and in art. One of the things that has gotten a lot of attention lately is Mary Cassatt's prints. A few years ago, someone discovered a portfolio of her prints. It had been folded up for years and years and years, which meant that it hadn't faded, because a lot of them, you have them out and they fade over time. And there was an exhibition that was put on, and a lot of people have been talking about these prints because they are very unusual. I even found a website that said that they are unequaled in the history of printmaking. We mentioned that she had learned. Etching in Parma, some years ago, and so we want to talk to you a little about what etching is. And this is a particular kind of etching, and she's combining some different techniques: soft ground etching, Drypoint, and Aquatint. Now, those of you who have taken art history too, I've defined etching. I haven't talked about soft ground etching. I've defined Drypoint, I've defined Aquatint, but don't worry, I imported the definitions, so we'll go over and explain those. the color is applied by hand. In other words, she doesn't have plates in every different color that she prints one over the other. She's basically done this as handwork. And that's why you will find, not only because of fading, but also because sometimes she will use slightly different colors in the different prints. And because they are by hand, they will come out slightly differently. One of the major influences on this, and one of the great inspirations for it, was the influence of Japanese woodcut. And the type of line that she uses is so close, and I'll show you some examples there. And of course, this she's long like to use pattern, but here you have this pattern which can be read either two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally, and that certainly is a characteristic of the Japanese woodcuts. Let's look at the Japanese woodcuts. In 1890, Cassatt they had an exhibition of Japanese woodcuts in Paris, and she went to the exhibit with Degas, and she was just blowing away, as we would say today. And so she had to go again. She took Berthe Morisot to go see it, and after she did this, she just got very excited and decided she had to do a series of prints. Now, Japanese woodblock prints were very popular in the middle of the 19th century in Europe. They actually started to come in at first as wrapping paper on things like imports on China. And then, of course, they got very popular, and they would import these. The artist I'm showing you here is one that she would have seen, Utamaro. And I thought that his work, the quality of the line, for example, seems to be very close to what she's doing. He's famous for using, well, he's famous for a lot of things, but for using the partial view, the figures which are close up and cut off, which we see the Impressionists doing, and we see Mary Cassatt doing. And his subjects are often women. Now, they aren't always the respectable upper-class women, but he's showing women doing their daily activities, cosmetics, or arranging their clothes or their hair or whatever. So this ties in, too, with the kind of subject matter that the Impressionists and Mary Cassatt are quite interested in. I was looking on the web to find pictures, and I found this one. Now, this is from 1920, so it's a 20th century woodcut. It's obviously nothing that Mary Cassatt would have seen. Well, I suppose she could have. She didn't die till 1926, but she was maybe losing her eyesight by this point. But she probably never saw this print. But I decided to use it as an example because it does follow the traditional linear quality pattern until I read, well, I don't know, I don't know that much about Japanese woodcuts, but until I read the caption, I didn't realize it was a 20th century work. And there's also, as we'll see, some closeness to the subject matter that she's using, so I thought we'll use this. It has the simplicity of form, some of the patterns. You can see the striped garment that's discarded, and the texture on the walls. And of course, this very, very fine linear quality, which is something you see in Japanese woodcuts. It doesn't seem like a Western woodcut would be at all. Which would be emphasizing the heavy, dark line. You can look at these and see the image as a flat pattern, or because of the shapes of the forms, the figure which can turn, can be in different positions, the background where you're seeing part of the house behind her. These are showing the depth. So you can read it as the figures seated in a certain area of a house, and you can see into the next room. So you have this interesting thing where you don't really have shading, like chiaroscuro, like dark, middle, light tones that you see in the Western world from Giotto on, Cavallini on, from the certainly from the Renaissance on even, but earlier too. And so that's a characteristic of these Japanese woodcuts. You can read them either as two-dimensional or three-dimensional, and they are not using shading. So here is the work that I wanted to compare it with. This is a Mary Cassatt etching, and it is a woman who is taking a bath. We would say a sponge bath, but remember, not everybody had lavish bathing facilities in the 19th century. So here's a woman who's bathing in a bowl. And the same thing, if the Japanese woodcut is after the bath, she's got her bowl in front of her. Looks like she may be wringing out a sponge or a cloth or something. I can't quite make it out. And then it's obviously there's been some water spilled around her. But you do see in both cases, the female figure with this same linear quality that Mary Cassatt has borrowed. And of course here the patterns are even more so. You've got stripes, you've got the sort of floral organic pattern in the carpet, and flowers on the pitcher. So it's this interesting mix of patterns that normally you wouldn't think would work, and yet they do. And of course, part of that is because you do have simple shapes without shading that aren't busy, like the furniture in the back of the woman. But certainly some of the same qualities that you find in Japanese woodcuts. Now, for those of you who are wondering, what is an etching? What is a dry point? What is Aquatint? I'll give you a little lesson. The first thing I want to say about this is the diagrams that I'm showing you here have what I call a tragic flaw or a fatal flaw. They're showing you a metal plate as though the sides are absolutely straight up and down. You could never do an etching. I don't know who drew this, but they obviously never did etchings. You can't do an etching that way. Your paper would tear and you get stuck in the press. It's not going to hung up. You have to have beveled edges. And the second thing, and I think this is just for pictorial reasons, it looks like they've just covered the top of it with your waxy ground. Well, every part of it, the side, the back. Today they sell particularly zinc and copper plates where the back is already coated and the sides are already beveled. So you just have to cover the top part. But here's the way you do an etching. You take a metal plate. Today we use a lot of zinc. Traditionally copper was used. And you cover it with a waxy ground. Beeswax and asphaltum. And there are other formulas that you could use. And then the artist has an etching needle or some kind of stylus, and he just scratches through that ground, revealing the metal. Now with a soft ground etching, there's other ways to reveal the metal. The ground has a lot of grease, or in some cases tallow, something more waxy in it. So it's still soft and pliable, it's not hard. You can actually use a varnish for the hard ground etching, which is just sort of like traditional etching. But for soft ground etching, your ground is very soft. And you can do some interesting things with it. You can take something like lace or something else with a pattern and press it into the ground, and then pull up some of the ground so that the plate would be exposed. Also, you don't have to have this really sharp stylus. You could have something that's, like I said, blunter, softer. And sometimes what you can do is you can just put paper down. You have to be careful it doesn't all pull everything up. And I think they had some specially treated waxy papers to do this. And you can press right through the paper. So you can actually have your drawing there and use a different kind of stylus and pull up the ground. What you're trying to do, of course, is expose the metal wherever you want a line. And so after you've got your design exposed in the ground, you want to etch it, which means that you're going to put the plate into a bath of acid, and there's different formulas. I understand today they actually have some non-lethal methods of doing this. When I was in school, we used to use, I think it was 1 part nitric acid to 3 parts water. So don't breathe it, is my best advice. It can literally sear your lungs and kill you if you breathe it too much. Use only in well-ventilated areas. Well, at any rate, you put the plate into the acid bath, and the acid bites, as we say, or dissolves. It bites into the exposed metal wherever you've removed the ground. And at that point, it dissolves the metal, it etches it, and it leaves incised lines or grooves. Okay, then you take the thing out, and you can go through this many, many times. You can, there's something called stop out, sort of like or tush, some kind of liquid, or just varnish, something that will stop it. And you can put that over areas that you don't want to be as dark, and put it back in again, and keep working it. But when you've got the whole thing etched, you take it out, you use a salt, you wash it off with water, and you take a solvent, and you clean off your ground, and you're left with a plate that has all of these incised lines in it. And then you cover the plate with ink. Now, in the case of Mary Cassatt, she would probably be painting or dabbing on the different colors, because some of those are fairly precise. They have to be in the lines. If you're just doing a black and white etching, you just roll it on or something. But you have to make sure the ink gets down into the grooves, and then you can wipe the surface, or in the case of the colored ones, you're going to leave that color there. But the ink needs, those outlines need to get down into the grooves. How do you print it? Well, you've got everything inked, let's say, and wiped. And then you would take, you have to have a special kind of printing press. It has these big rollers, and either the bed of a flat surface moves through the rollers, or the rollers have to move over the surface. Usually it's a movable bed, which is just a big flat piece of metal. And they'll put what we call blankets of felt down, and then usually a piece of newsprint or something to protect the felt. And then you put the plate on it with the backside down. And then you take your very good paper, usually rag paper that's been moistened and blotted, and then you put that on top of the printing surface, on the top of your plate, and then probably in a piece of paper, and then more blankets of felt. And then you run it through the printing press, which means basically the rollers go over it and they squeeze the paper down into the grooves. And then, of course, you pull it off and you hang it up to dry. Ink, white print. You can do quite a few. Etchings, of course, the metal will eventually wear down. Now, we mentioned she also uses Drypoint with it. Drypoint is a similar technique. It's printed the same way. But one big difference, etching uses acid. Drypoint is more direct. You have, in this case, you can't use a soft stylus. You have a Drypoint needle, special kind of stylus that can scratch directly into the metal plate. Now, it doesn't really remove the metal. It just sort of makes a burr or a rough edge on either side of the groove. And that's where you get this wonderful velvety Drypoint line. If you want that line, then you can only do a few good images, because every time it goes through the printing press, it flattens out the burr. I suppose you could re-scratch it or something. The other method we mentioned is Aquatint. And I just brought this in from the survey class, actually, with a good example here of a black and white, or actually gray tones, in a sense, a black and white print, where you can see that the background and, say, on the desk and on the man's breeches and various places, it almost looks like a stipple effect or a granular effect. That's the effect of Aquatint. Aquatint is a way, if you had, say, a black and white etching or print, and you want to use halftones or gray tones. So it's a way of getting the effect of a gray tone. And you take rosin dust, and you generally would have it in something like a little cheesecloth bag. Now they have, of course, if you use it at ETSU, you have a box with a fan in it. You just put your plate in and you switch the fan on, and the rosin dust circulates and covers the plate very easily, very evenly. But you don't have those in the 19th century. Well, the 18th century is this example. So you just sort of tap your little cheesecloth bag and put the rosin dust evenly over your plate. Presumably, in most cases, you would have already done your etching, your lines, although it's perfectly possible, because I had a professor that made us do it, to make it work entirely with Aquatint. So the dust is applied to the plate, and then you heat it. And if you heat it just right, the rosin dust will start to melt and it will adhere to the plate. If you leave it on too long, it will just go soupy and make a solid surface on the plate. You have to clean it off and start all over. If you don't get it heated enough, and it just won't stick to the plate. But if you do it just right, you get the dust so it's just starting to melt and adhere to the plate. And then you put it in the acid bath, just like you would with an etching. First you stop out, cover up with varnish or some other surface. Everything you don't want to print. In this case, it's the top of the man's garment and part of the wings of one of the owls and the words. And of course, the words would have to have been written in reverse, because everything prints in reverse. But at any rate, anything you don't want to be Aquatint, you stop that out, cover that up, and then you put it in. And the acid bites, etches, eats, whatever word you like, between the rosin dust particles, but it can't get through them. And so you can take it out, rinse it off, clean it off, print it the same way as you would print an ordinary etching. And of course, you can also have lighter and darker by the same method of stopping something out and then putting something in longer, which makes the grooves, or in this case the speckly surface, deeper and will hold more ink. Now, what Mary Cassatt does with these is use that as her some of her solid surfaces. This is, I just love this, this print. It's called The Letter. Very simple. A woman sitting at a secretary desk. Looks like she's finishing up her letter. She's going to fold it, maybe. Did they have adhesive that you licked in the 19th century? I don't know. But she's finishing up her letter, going to mail it. And you have several different types of patterns. You've got the floral pattern on the walls, light and sort of pinks and greens and white background. And then the deeper, richer pattern that is on her garment, which is blues and deep blues, royal blues, and golds. And then, of course, you have some areas that are just, that flat blue, which is the top of the table. So I'm not quite sure exactly what she's done where, but I think the solid areas like the blues, and of course the browns on the secretary desk would probably be the Aquatint. Hold it and give it a slight texture to it. And then she could use either etching or Drypoint for the lines, or a combination thereof probably. This is the woman bathing, which we've seen before, and I think you can see here the flat surfaces, such as the dresser, would be the Aquatint, and then etching or Drypoint for the fine lines. The space, we don't have any shading, but the pose of the woman, the way the commode, the dresser recedes into the background, suggests distance. Suggests a three-dimensional shapes, but we can also read it as a flat surface with, of course, these very fine lines, the patterns